UFC 309 took place over this past weekend, and here is my quick rant. I thought this card stunk. Everything about it stunk. It stunk on paper. The build-up stunk, and then the fight ended up stinking. You know, how surprising. Starting out at the top with the John and Stipe fight. I'll have some other videos out going a little more in depth in this fight. John looked great. I think John's the GOAT. But man, I think the story of the night was how bad Stipe looked. Maybe the best base for heavyweight, the best base for UFC is not taking 3.5 years off. The guy's 42. He had no business being in there. I love Stipe. I think Stipe is the greatest heavyweight of all time, and he's an absolute legend, a top, 12-ish fighter in the history of the UFC. Guy had no business being in there. Hats off to him, getting a big payday to end his career. He can now retire, fight fires and do who knows what else. Love Stipe, but man, that was hard to watch. I think it was very evident very early on that this was not even the Stipe that fought Francis Ngannou 3.5 years ago, a guy who got flatlined badly, by the way. It was not that guy. It was not the guy that fought DC in the trilogy, a guy who was much faster. You can't even compare just two completely different fighters who just share the same name, man. That was not the Stipe Miocic that we've seen. So again, I thought John looked great. I thought his stand-up looked way better than it had in previous fights. There were a lot of questions coming in about how he would handle his frame at heavyweight, because although we only saw it for a couple minutes and although he had a quick finish against Ciryl Gane, he just looked awkward in there. So, again, he got the finish, so we kind of shut up about it. But he did look awkward moving around. Obviously, he came in a little bit lighter in this fight. And I thought his stand-up looked really good. His jab looked, again, better than I had seen it in the past couple fights. I thought he felt very comfortable in there, about 13 pounds less than he was in his heavyweight debut last March. The kicks, the front side kick, the spinning back kick, like I said, the jab looked really nice. He looked a little more confident in his boxing than in years past. That trip he had in the first round was, it was so great. And then he transitioned to some vicious elbows, almost got him out of there in the first. But yeah, Stipe was able to make it to the third. Just a beautiful finish with that spinning back kick. You can't write it but much better than that. It sounded like a gunshot. We see Stipe crumble to the canvas, and then John finishes the deal, closes the show in a pretty great fashion there. But man, again, I don't know how people are coming out. If that solidifies John as the GOAT for you, again, you can unfollow this channel. You can, go actually then unfollow it, refollow it right back, because I'll teach you some free knowledge. Because, again, I think John Jones is the GOAT, the greatest in UFC history. If you think differently because of things that happen outside the cage, I completely think that's okay. But in terms of inside the UFC octagon, that guy's the greatest ever. But that fight did nothing for me. And now I'm just wondering, I feel like we wasted this past year. We're wasting Tom Aspinall's prime. Quite frankly, we wasted Francis Ngannou's prime. And I'm kind of just wondering what's happening here at heavyweight. This thing is becoming a disaster. Again, I'm going to put out another video just talking about that. But this was just a ridiculous. Stipe looked horrible. Stipe looked terrible. It looked like he was trying to fight. That's you in your dreams, right? You're not able to get any punches off. He couldn't get inside. He was slow. He was just not the guy that ran the heavyweight division forever. Man, it was sad to see him go out like that. But I don't really think he should have been in there in the first place. So again, I'm not taking much from this fight. I'll go more in depth in what's next. John had the chance at the end when he said, "I got one more in me." I thought maybe we were going to get the call out. Obviously, he doesn't do it. And then he gets right back on the mic in the post-fight press conference, and he's talking about, how that fight just doesn't make sense for him. He's not going to give Tom the chance. Such a disappointing night, man. This story has just gotten weirder and weirder. But yeah, moving on, co-main event, Charles do Bronx Oliveira. Man, was that the best Charles has ever looked? This guy's career has just been so all over the place. Obviously, he was this, highly touted prospect, probably came into the UFC a little too young, took some losses, was known as a quitter. The run he had to become champion, to defend the belt multiple times against the best guys, the Charles Oliveira era, that, everyone loved that. The guy became one of the biggest stars in the UFC without speaking a word of English. That just shows you his aura, how exciting he is, how likable of a guy he is. And man, it was great to see him back in the win column. And again, I think that was the best he's ever looked. A lot of that was probably due to Chandler's inactivity. I didn't think Chandler looked good at all. But man, Charlie Olives, the stand-up was great as usual. The kicks were unbelievable. How about the offensive wrestling of Olives? How about the takedowns? You know, for all the credentials this guy has in the grappling department, for the submissions, you don't want to fall him to the ground. He's never been known for his takedowns, and he took down Chandler a couple times. A lot of people thought Chandler might be the one taking Oliveira down. Quite the opposite. Charlie Olives taking him down. I don't know why I keep calling him Charlie Olives, but Oliveira taking him down, controlling him on the ground. I mean, just completely outclassed him in the stand-up. How about a non-aggressive? Is this the newest form of Oliveira, the newest unlockable character is, a calm Charles Oliveira. That was like when we saw Calm Francis. The reason I gave Michael Chandler a chance in this fight, because I thought we were just going to see the classic Charles Oliveira. He comes out, he makes it a firefight. And Chandler's live in a fight like that, man. Chandler, is going to swing for the fences. But we saw Charles Oliveira, cool, calm, and collective. He touched him up on the feet. The kicks, I mean, man, that guy looked great. And every bomb that Chandler threw, Oliveira with his high guard, nothing really got in there until very late in the fifth. Man, what a fifth round that was. That had me on the edge of my seat, probably out of my seat, jumping up and down, actually. But, I mean, those shots in the back of the head, it's time to have a discussion about whether or not, Chandler is actually a dirty fighter. That's kind of been his reputation during his career. It showed that that's a very real thing. I like Chandler, and, I love he's entertaining. He comes to go to war. The ending sequence with, jumping on his back was ridiculous, but that had me fired up. But those shots in the back of the head, man. And Keith Peterson standing right there. Yeah, no nonsense, Keith Peterson. Now, that's no longer your nickname, pal. What are you doing? Like, that's how people get hurt. That's how you get brain damage. And it wasn't just one shot. And I get it. I completely understand. A lot of the back of the head strikes, it's tough because the guy's moving. It's not intentional. I'm not saying this was intentional, but it happened. It doesn't matter if it's intentional. You stop it there. And that we were seconds away from that fight being over, like that fight ending. So, I mean, I'm very glad that Oliveira survived. He got out of it. But man, that we got to take a look at Keith Peterson, because that's not okay. Again, that's how people get brain damage. That they should have been split up at that moment. They should have been stood up. I don't know if it was a point deduction, but there were like 4, 5, 6 bad shots in the back of the head. Everyone was flipping out. The commentary team is flipping out. That was not okay. Again, Chandler looks terrible. I don't know there's anyone in the history of the UFC in any weight class that falls over from overextending on a punch more. The fact that he does that as a 38-year-old man who's been training MMA as long as he has is a little ridiculous to me. He had, who knows what happens. He did it multiple times in this fight. He does it multiple times in every fight. But in that finishing, or in that sequence where he hurt Oliveira bad, as he's chasing after him, he just throws a haymaker and like falls down, and Oliveira is able to kind of control him. Obviously, Chandler ended up getting on top, and that's where the strikes in the back of the head happened. But man, you gotta, I get that's his shtick, right? That he's a moron and he just starts throwing his hands, and that's why we love him. But that was a little ridiculous. What's next for Oliveira? I think you got to give him a title shot. The timeline's about to get real funky. Islam's fighting in January or February, and then he's probably not going to be fighting again till the summer. Oliveira just fought. It's the middle of November, so I don't think he's going to want to wait till June. I don't know what happens. And it also gets a little weird with Islam's career now. He has a rematch now with Arman Saruki, and a rematch of a fight from a couple years ago. He already had a rematch with Volk. You don't want to be in this Izzy place where you just keep rematching, recycle, repeating against all these guys. I guess all these guys who clear out the division, it kind of just ends up happening. But 55 is a loaded class. I hope we have some guys, some new young and up and comers go challenge Islam. But, will that fight go any differently, Oliveira Islam? I don't know. But man, Oliveira looked great. I think that was like the best version we've seen of him. Even in the Islam fight, talking about his kind of low fight IQ, how he just kind of goes crazy. He was the one. I just said we don't see Oliveira shooting for takedowns. The last fucking takedown I remember from Oliveira, maybe in the second round of Poirier, but that wasn't really like a clean, like single double. Like when he shot out the gates against Islam, and like immediately you were like, what is this guy doing? So if he can be a little bit smarter in that fight, I don't think anyone beats Islam right now, but Charles Oliveira has the best shot. Charles Oliveira back in the win column. It's a good day. That was the highlight of the card, and it was the best fight on the card. Bo Nickel, you're a bum. You're a chump. Hamzat, I'll beat you easily. I laugh watching Israel Adesanya and Alex Bejeda because of how easily I would be able to take them down and finish them. Yeah, well, you just had 15 minutes locked in a cage with Paul Craig, and you both walked out looking like nothing happened. I perfectly predicted that he was not going to shoot on Craig. I thought he wanted to show off his stand-up, prove that he could win a fight with his hands, not just a flash knockout. But he could actually go in there and strike with, someone at 85. And I guess that's technically what he did. He won the fight, but that was so boring. We saw boos in every round. I just didn't like that performance from Nickel. For you to talk the way you do and then to come out with those performances, trust me, pal, that's a recipe for becoming hated. People are already not really loving this guy. To come out with a performance like that against Paul Craig, who I love Paul Craig. And yeah, trust me, I know about the wins on his resume, dude. We've heard all about it. Striking is about as bad as it comes in the UFC, and you weren't able to do anything with that. Nobody did. So anyone listening who, you hit the heavy bag, you've hit the mitts with your buddies. Once you start to feel like the man a little bit, maybe you took a cardio kickboxing class or two, you do all those feints. Everyone knows the memes, like, me waiting for the shower to warm up. You're kind of just, doing the head movement. That's what your uncle does when he sees you, right? I mean, it was just 15 minutes of that from Nickel. You kind of feel like you're Izzy when, prime Izzy, the feint king, right? That's what you feel like. That's what Bo Nickel was doing for 15 minutes. Unfortunately, contrary to what Rogies has said about Izzy with the feints, if you know, those don't actually, accumulate any damage, unfortunately, when you're not actually touching the guy. So we saw a lot of that from Nickel. Just not a great performance. Get ready to learn Jack Hermanson, buddy, because Hermanson, I really want to see Vettori, one of these guys at 85. Like, let's get him going, right? Let's get this guy going. 85 is not this loaded division, but for this guy, if he's going to keep talking the way he is, I don't like this, Sean O'Malley slow rise. O'Malley was at least putting people's lights out, right? So, you can't be having fights like that and just, we know this guy is this credentialed wrestler, maybe the most credentialed wrestler currently in the UFC. So, we know he's supposed to be this great wrestler. So to just go out there and have an insanely boring 15-minute tip and tap fight, I don't really know what to say about that performance. Nickel might have to. I don't even know what to say, but I'm talking way too much about him. Mauricio Ruffy, this was kind of the highlight of the card for me, other than Oliveira. The Fighting Nerds, man, could you say enough about these guys? Definitely the fastest rising camp. It seems like each of these guys, they're all some of the fastest rising prospects in their respective divisions. We saw what Prates did to Neil Magny last week. That guy is, he's as fast as a prospect as we have in the UFC. Barajo has went from this prospect to now a top 5 guy who's calling out everyone else in that division, who's looking like he might be a fight away from a UFC championship. Gene Silva, again, another stud. These guys are all coming up together. They seem like great dudes. But having Rufy now, again, that was only his second UFC fight. Put up some highlights in the fight. I surprised he didn't get the knockout, whatever Tubby's name was. He came in a little bit overweight. Maybe that helped his chin. But, man, Rufy looked good. People are calling for this guy to get like a top 15 type of guy at lightweight, and why not, man? Like, again, I don't know who exactly is next for him, but I want to see this guy fight someone big because, man, I think he's super talented. But, yeah, UFC 309, I want to put out a video ranking the cards from this year, but I think that might have been the worst card of the year.